house you're in at the moment is the house of
my great granduncle.
Your great granduncle.
Yes. He was on my mother's side, Owen Kane. I don't know if he played music himself, but this where we are here now, would have been dances in his day. Yeah.
How far back can you kind of go in your family? And we'll say how old is this house really? Or?
This house was only built. It was built in 1910.
Right.
1910.
So
This land would have been. It would have belonged to Richard or Dick Burke, Dick O'Donnell, Newport landlord. This was all, and it was only settled after them.
Okay. Right. So this house is 1910, and
there are ruins of houses.
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
land. Old cottages. Very small houses.
And you were brought up. You were born, reared here. You're one of four of you, right?
Yeah. I was brought up just down at the crossroad, Clonishel, or Seamus Stuffy likes to call it Clonishel. Clonishel down there, yeah. My brothers all play. My mother would have played, not out now. She still wouldn't play out, but she plays at home. She plays the accordion and plays the whistle, and she would have really encouraged us to play music. She loves music. She's mad at music. She would encourage us. Her own mother played the accordion, and all her mother's people played, all their family, the whole lot. There was a load of sisters. And
so your earliest memories, there was plenty of music in the house. There's an interest in music in the house.
Yeah, there was, yeah. Right. And my mother was very involved in setting up classes, getting music going in the area again. She thought it was awful that there was all the dances and stuff that she would have grown up with, they were going, they weren't around. And of course, being real social, she loved the community thing of it.
So your mother was a great kind of pusher as a young grown up. She kind of introduced you to this kind of...
Introduced the music, yeah. She just loved it herself, I suppose, and she always thought it would be a lovely thing to have for your own head. She always reckoned that was the thing, that it was an escape or whatever. It was good for a person. And I suppose she did love it that much herself, and she was involved in setting up kind of a cultist branch here, which they're real renegades. They don't follow the book at all. They have their own version of cultists. They don't have any time for the fly really. But and as a result, then she brought John Hoban to the area. She brought John Hoban used to come and used to play on a Friday night in Newport, stay in either our house or our cousins up the road, Callahan's, and then would teach Saturday morning. All the kids in the area played music, like we all played. And then we all went to school and played, and then John went off to find himself, and we used to go to Bernie Dunhu's father, Martin Dunhu.
Yeah.
No, actually Martin Dunhu was probably before that. John came and went. I was too young to go to Martin, but I used to be brought to the classes and I'd be put down the back told to be quiet. But they used to teach. They used to be a guy, I'm sure Emer told you.
Massive.
Huge amount. And you have to go up in front of everybody and play your tune.
He was such a relevant man for teaching in the county.
And there was nobody else teaching.
No.
There was no one else teaching.
So Martin Dunhu was the man, really.
He was the man.
And then John Hoban went in, and of course he came back, and he started.
It was after that actually when John came. I think it was Martin.
I think Martin was first, yeah.
Martin was doing
it first.
Yeah.
What age were you when you started playing?
I started playing. My brother started playing. He was 5, and I wanted to go playing as well. So I started playing apparently when I was 3 on a whistle. I can't have caused much damage at 3.
Well, you were plenty of damage, I'd say.
Blowing the ears.
But you wanted to do it.
I wanted to play, because there was such a buzz. They were all playing, and then we'd go in the car. My mother was mad into it, and then she had a provisional license. We'd laugh with this locally. She did a provisional license, and she would take off because none of the men would be all busy. And on a Saturday, she'd leave our house with us 4. But the youngest one of Mike would always come, and we'd go up the village here, up to Round Kilmore, and we'd collect pappies, some of the Gerties, Maria Gertie's great consumer here in America, and then the other pappies, the birds, the other Gerties, the birds, collect 4 out of that house. Then go around the village, go around and come to Callum's and collect another 4. And the car was full, and this was his crack. And there'd be 3 piles of us on the back of the car. Like there'd be the older ones, then the next year, and then we'd be up on top of the whole lot. The car was packed, and then Tilly would come as well maybe, and sometimes Maureen would come. The 2 mammies would come as well. So there'd be 3 mammies in the car, and a rake of kids, and we'd go to Castlebar, and it was the best crack. So you wanted to be in the thick of it. You wanted to just get into it, like.
And Castlebar was
over to Martin Dunhu. And I wasn't even I couldn't be left at home like, but I wasn't even playing. I never played for Martin Dunhu. I went to Bernie. Bernie used to come to Newport later, and I remember teaching me in the old convent in Newport, and a few times they couldn't find the key or something, would teach us in the car, teaching us in the car out to the place. And she just laughed at that.
Was there much music in the school, would you say?
Not much. I used to teach music in the school. Imagine,
even as a
school.
Wow.
Because they got a teacher in. There was just a lot of music in, and your one would have appreciation for it, but she didn't play music. And we play there, and then as they got older, a new teacher came in, and she told them that she could play music, and that's how she got the job. And then she couldn't play, so she used to have me teach them. I was in 5th class at the time, and I would teach the rest of them. We used to such crack. But they used to all play the whistles, and we all played there. My father's father played the fiddle. He was from Bal. Well, Kilchima, not Kilchima. What do you call it? Heading for, oh my God, he'll kill me. I can't think the name of the place. The town name. I'll think of it in a second. But he played the fiddle. And as a kid, I always used to see his fiddle. His fiddle used to be, we'd have a spare room. You know, you'd have a spare room. And in the spare room, above on there was a kind of a wardrobe. And you could flick up the top of it. And the fiddle used to be left in there in a blanket. And I used to always be jumping on the bed trying to look at this fiddle. Because we were told we're not let near it, this fiddle. But then when I started, then I always thought the fiddle would be nice. Then when I was 8, they did up that fiddle for me.
So you're playing fiddle since 8?
Yeah. Right. Well, I know I started earlier, but I started an awful Chinese job.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I got going then.
With
the fiddle, which is you should nearly be given a good one at the start, because they're so bad, or they were so bad, those new.
No, they can put you off.
Yeah, they were very bad, those beginner fiddles.
So, and you went through school. You went to secondary school.
I went to secondary school. Kilmore now was all music, and the great appreciation for it. Went to secondary school, different story completely. Apart from the ones from the country, like Alicia, I was lucky. Alicia Kelly was a few years ahead of me in school, and then Mhaigh Gielty here, that's a concertina player. We would have played a lot as kids. She was a year ahead of me, and then there was more musicians. And my mother and Alicia's father Des, they set up a kind of group of Ceoil, and my mother was mighty fair play to her, actually. I forgot about that. She organised us to go to on tour to Scotland. Playing for nothing, but just we all experience. We all went over, and we would have played at the cabarets in Westport during the summer, and any money we got was put towards it, and we're all brought over in a bus, went over and stayed for a week in Scotland and played at different concerts, and you would have got pittance or whatever, but it was just the crack. But it was brilliant, because it was a gang of us in it, like there were 12 or 13 musicians, all the same age, and sure, we just just loved it.
But that whole idea of mixing with apart from your mother going on Saturday putting 14 children in the back of a car, but mixing with players of your own age or a bit older from different parts of the surroundings, or different parts of the county even, like you mentioned Westport, like was that something that you look back and say, gee, that was an amazing time? Oh,
it was, and we knew at the time it was amazing, and we knew because we were in school. When we were in school, there was so few of us in school, but then we got together on the Fridays. John Hoban took us for a while. And then cousin my Jenny Kilroy would have taken us for a while, and we would have done the flags for the sake of just having something to do, like, you know, as in a focus. But we went to Wales as well another year, but we do things like that, and there was a great gang was in it, like, you know, and I think my mother, I'd say in the back of her head, she thought it was the only way of keeping us going, because remember we used to hate bringing the fiddle into school, like, you didn't want to be running it into school, you'd be hiding it under a coat, like,
it wasn't
you know,
cool.
It wasn't cool. It wasn't cool at all.
And when would that have changed for you? Like, I mean, you loved it, but still, when did you take it a bit serious again?
Well, I think, see, then as well, we used to go, we started going to Milltown very young. Like, I think I was 5 when I first went to Milltown. Like that again, that whole network. We got a house, and there was 3 sets of families in the house, like all loads into the house, and we played music. And I think in Milltown, you realised, you know, it's alright playing a few tunes, but you wanted to get good, like. You know, it was a social thing as well. You know, it was very sociable, like, you know, and you'd play tunes and you knew a tune and you could join in if you knew, and you know, you took it fairly, not that you took it seriously, but you wanted to know tunes, like, it was like really learning tunes, and like it was not that it ever felt like work, but you really wanted to get things off.
But did you feel, were you going down with a repertoire of tunes anywhere, or were you kind of going down?
We used to go to classes, we meant to go to classes, but then you'd be going off playing tunes with other people from all over the country, you know, and there was that, and Leisha came down and stayed in that house, so everyone used to come down and stay in that house, like, there was a gang of people, and that was it. We made go to the lessons, and then she would be out all evening, like, playing, all afternoon playing, and in those days, we weren't so much let in the pub, we'd be out in the street playing, the teenagers playing, if you're like they are now, I suppose.
They know it's gone full circle,
yeah.
So you'd have remembered kind of going down, mixing with other people from different parts of the country, like, I mean, I remember myself, like, I wouldn't have gone to an awful lot of these festivals or these Milltown Malbys or whatever, but I remember the first time I got an opportunity to play for someone outside Erris was like, I remember, Jesus, people, there's like this music, and from outside here, like, oh, geez, it must be something, because there's these people playing it, and there's these people, and they're playing
and
it in this county, and it kind of gives you a bit of an encouragement.
Oh, it does, and then you weren't like, you didn't, and even when you went back to school and you weren't cool playing your fiddle, you didn't care, because it didn't matter.
Because you knew people in Clare or Galway or whatever.
And you did, and you'd had a way better time in the summer in Linenhall for a week.
You
know, there was a whole different thing, and I suppose you saw that side of it, like, and then it's very social, like there's people you'd met in those first years that you still know, you know. You know,
you never lose. You have friends for life.
Friends for life, and then even I remember reading there someone Ben Lennon saying one time about leaving Milltown, and you'd stop somewhere. He said you'd be absolutely, you know, you have a great week. He said you wouldn't look at the clock, you wouldn't look at the time, what day of the week, anything for the whole time. And then he said you'd be driving home and your head would be full of tunes, and you might stop somewhere for petrol. You're back to normality, you know, that kind of. But you're, you know, it's like, it's an oasis.
Yeah, an oasis, yeah.
And he said, you're like, oh, I should have stopped for pet for another hour.
I should have chanced it. Yeah.
But you know that thing that you were just in your, I suppose,
a little bubble, a little world where you had a load of mates that understood you.
Yeah, and I never had that now with the flags or anything. It was a different thing. There wasn't the same, we're all in this together thing. There was like, you know, people get awful het up about flags. I never played.
Did you compete?
No, I never. No. The only time I ever competed now was at Cooper Gold. Right. And myself and Ray used to do the odd duet if we could keep a straight face long enough to play the pair of us.
But competition meant absolutely.
And my mother had no interest in competition either, so she would never have pushed it in that direction because she reckoned she put people off anyway. And then she used to always say, "Sure, it's only one person's opinion. Who cares?"
She's damn right.
Yeah. She wasn't into that, and she always.
Great way she has. Yeah. And then. So you were kind of young at this stage too. You were going after these kind of things. You went to college, I take it, at some stage. You went off.
I went to college to Dublin and was UCD, which I hated. But the first week or the first few days I was in UCD, I thought I couldn't get over this. Like going from a 2-teacher school first to secondary school in Westport, 500 was a major shock to the system, and then going from there to thousands in UCD and trying to find. You know, I hated UCD.
Wow. And
you felt such an outsider. But then I remember on the concourse there's this big traffic through up through the middle of UCD, meeting Steve Larkin, who I just met in Milltown, and he was like, Jesus. And so met up with Steve, and then met Johnny Connolly, Johnny Box, and a load of musicians and then that kept me going in Dublin. That I did more of that now than I did study.
I know, yeah.
But without that I wouldn't have survived. I did a year in UCD. And then I went to Germany and I came back, and then I came back and I went to Galway. I couldn't go back to Dublin again, but that meeting Steve really kept me going too, because I'd say if I hadn't met him and got into meeting musicians and stuff, I would have given up the music, I say really too, because he felt so just, it was just.
You were saying you felt out of place or something.
Oh, you felt like you were.
And why, if you could put it down to something, is it the whole massiveness of it, the whole.
But even the fact that you had a Mayo accent. It was, you were just straight away. Culture. And like I remember meeting people one time, a fella was in my class with me and he was chatting to me and I said, so where are you from? And he goes, Crossmolina. And I'm thinking, Crossmolina? Where did you get the accent? Like, you know, that you had to change who you were to fit in.
Yeah.
So that wasn't going to be
No, it wasn't for you.
No.
Then so Galway was a bit more.
Oh, Galway was, I loved Galway, and just the minute you ride in Galway, sure, as what did Johnny Connolly, Shan Johnny, like as in Connemara Johnny used to say, sure, Galway Mayo were the same, he used to always say. Like, you know, you'd understand, and there was so much music, and
it was nearly the same. Yeah, same,
and you know, and you know, you could say hello to someone on the street and they wouldn't look at you twice, like, you know, and you felt very much home. Then I did, played a lot of music in Galway now, played a lot of music in Galway, it was great. We was playing nearly every night a week in Galway. Gigs. I put myself through college in Galway playing music, actually. Wow. Yeah. I was there. I went there in '96.
Yeah, there was a great spell of it.
Great spell.
Yeah.
I was there in 2000. Brilliant. Yeah.
But being in these places, you mentioned you were in Germany for a while. Yeah. Talk to us about after Galway. Then, did you go to Scotland?
I did. Yeah, I went to Scotland. I went to Scotland. I was sent to Scotland as part of the course I was doing. I was doing hotel management, and I ended up in Scotland, in a hotel in Scotland, and Bill Wright, great musician as well. I had met Graham, who I since married, of course, Graham Wright, but I had met him in Galway one time, it was home session, it was a lovely tune with some great fiddle player, and then Bill was saying, don't forget now to ring Graham when you get to Glasgow and he'll have tunes, and I said, no, I definitely will, like. So met up Graham and started playing lots of music in Scotland too, like lots of music, lot of Irish music in Glasgow. Like more in Edinburgh now you get more Scottish music, but there's a real Irish thing in Glasgow. So that was great. Like that kept.
That's another home away from home.
Home away from home, yeah.
And was it a similar experience to Galway, like as opposed to Dublin? Like did you feel?
Oh, you'd even feel more. Yeah, but Glasgow was such a friendly city.
Yeah.
And even remember in Glasgow, like the postman. Like you see you looking lost, he'd say, where are you going in? And he'd bring you off to wherever you're going there. You know, it's a different vibe. Like you don't get that in Dublin even. No. I know that the Irish influence or what, like, but
it is amazing that stays with us, that we nearly, I think you touched on something there earlier on, that you're nearly embarrassed when you go up to the likes of these big cities of where you're from in a weird way, because you don't know how to interact, or you don't put on the accent.
No.
Like our friend from across mine, you know, you don't. You nearly have to fit in.
And even, you know, as such a thing as asking for a bus, how to go anywhere. You know, like buses in Dublin, sure, I didn't know where I was going anyway. You know, the way people, and you know, like, what are you asking? You know, like, you're supposed to automatically know which bus. Like, even Bill Wright, Graham's brother, will tell a story, but when he came to Ireland first, and he's here, I don't know, 30 years or more, and he arrived in O'Connell Street and walked as far as Trinity, and he had to get a bus from somewhere around Trinity. So he asked the bus, he saw a bus coming, and whatever number was on, there was one number on the front, another number on the side, and he said to the bus driver, he said, is this number whatever, is it this number or this number, whatever. He wasn't being smart, he was saying, is it this number, because it was late, like, and he was trying to get to a friend's house, and he says, oh, my fucking driver inside it was like, you know, that should be the attitude, like, with the dub, you know, it's like, you know, and that you'd get that all the time, I suppose, in Dublin. It's probably just, you know, out of your comfort zone.
Out of your comfort zone, yeah.
But you got to go into the bus in Glasgow and say, I am supposed to go somewhere, where the hell am I? And they'll tell you, oh, here, come on. And you know, it's a different mentality.
Could you put that down to them being the fruit of immigrants?
Maybe, yeah.
From this part of the country themselves, you know, like how the Dublin people didn't have to kind of leave.
No, yeah,
it's
exactly.
the same extremes of Mayo people or Galway people.
And even I worked with the girl in Glasgow. She was lovely. She's a bit older than me now, a bit older than me. But she remember saying, she said we're all Irish, and she was saying that when she went to school, she was in Partick. She was brought up in Partick. Now, and I said the same for Anderson, another huge area in Glasgow. Anywhere around the docks there, Irish people settled. But she was saying that she remember one time they had an English teacher from below the border, they say, teaching them, and she was saying they're doing animals. And where does the cow live? And a cow lives in this, and a pig in a pigsty. And then was, where does the hen live? And they're all, and hands up, an old car. That was so good. And she was like, an old car. And they're all like, yeah. And all these kids were, every summer they were shipped home. They all went home because the parents were working. They spent their summers in Sligo and Mayo and Donegal.
Where hens lived in old cars.
But I thought it was a great example of cultural.
That's unbelievable, yeah.
And they couldn't go on a hen house, but a pin. What are you on about? There's none of them. And she said there's big classes. None of them knew what she's on. All had an old car experience.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Then you came back.
And I moved back here around. What was it, 2004 I came back. There was a job going on the Gaelscoil here in Westford, and I just thought, you know, because I always really liked the Irish and I wanted to keep that going, and I come back to do teaching. Mairead had asked me to go in there and teach a bit. I was teaching a bit of music up there, and then Mairead contacted me and said there's a job coming up, and I thought, you know what, I'll go for that for a while. It's like, come home with the intention now of not being here very long, and here I am like 20 years later. Nearly, imagine.
Yeah. But it was home.
Oh, it was home, but I never thought I'd live at home maybe. But then I suppose when you have your own place, even though it's just up, like it literally is not even a mile away, it's half a mile down to Crossford, but your own place.
But it's your own.
And I must say, I love being home. And I always nearly feel like I'm nearly here for the weekend, like there's a novelty to it. Like I love being home, and even, you know, I've gone more than 10 years, and there was a whole, you know, people that you wouldn't have seen in all those years, and, you know, getting back in, and then there's loads of music around. We're lucky.
Yeah.
Like in Scotland was great, but there's music here is a more an everyday thing. To there, it's still a kind of a, I know it's like it's not everywhere. Like people over here, there's a great understanding of music here, I think. Still.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
It's not like just.
It's more real. It's more.
Yeah. It's part of life.
Everyday part of life.
Part of life, like.
And how evident is that in the county we're in? We talked earlier on again about the relevance of Mayo in the cultural aspect, but like for you coming back, like you're after describing the question, but like how music was an everyday thing, and it's very evident to you still. Like I mean, you can still say, like we know each other. Like, but there's plenty of music around the area. Music is part of what it is to be from here.
Yeah.
But how relevant is the Mayo? How strong is the Mayo flag?
Well, I think we were never even told how much the Mayo thing was. Even I, McFadden, remember hearing, I was living in Galway and I heard he was from Mayo. I didn't even know he was up the road, like. And like we would have been brought up with so much music, and I never knew that. And there wasn't even a source, like, you know, you'd see, you knew McFadden was in Chicago, but you didn't know that he was born. He was born.
So you had to go to Galway to find out that he lived up
the road.
From a couple
and like, and then loads, and then I suppose maybe we've all, I don't know, maybe we were maturing. I know that whole 1916, I think that was a great cure for a lot of people. You know, people started talking about those old things, and maybe that got us all back thinking about looking at music and
pride of place.
And the gatherings and things like that. And then of course Joe Byrne is brilliant. Joe Byrne is brilliant for saying, did you hear this one? And he knows you have a bit of interest, and he you know, he sends you stuff, and he's great for making it, because we were never brought up to think that there was this. And then the more you look, there's any amount of this music around.
But also how important it is.
Yeah.
And like growing up in Irish music circles, of course, there's the Mozart, Beethoven and Bach of Irish music, and they're all from a townland or two townlands of South County Sligo, very close to the Mayo border. But in researching into their music, how strongly their music and their musical experiences and upbringing was fueled by visiting their cousins south of the border in County Mayo, the Towies, for instance, the Dixons, who would have influenced their dancing, some of their music. Then they went to America, made big names for themselves, intermingled with some very strong Mayo characters, who undoubtedly were. I'd like to say McFadden was somewhat of a musical intellect, in the sense that he had a bit of knowledge about the tunes. Something you said earlier on, if they had a question about a tune, bring in McFadden, bring him back in.
Yeah.
Then surely it must have had a standing in the music world.
Must have had, you know,
because they weren't asking Mac to come in because he was great crack. He had a knowledge of something.
A knowledge of something, definitely. And Tony's brother, Charlie Cohn in America, would be on about. He'd often go on about the Mayo people, and you know, they don't ever seem to have a name, one name. It's like the Mayo people. He'd be on about having tunes with the Mayo people. I know Seamus Heenan would have been one of those Mayo people that played with Charlie Conan, and that's way later, a generation way later. But they were definitely he would have always said that they were a great source of music, but he said they were never. He said like they used to play in houses. A lot of them played in houses in New York in that time. Charlie Cohn often went about that.
They played in houses.
They played in houses.
So they weren't playing out.
They weren't playing out.
And if you were to put that down to something, the poor old crater is there in us. Was definitely there in us in the past, and maybe to a certain degree is still there.
Yeah, we didn't think we're up to scratch.
We didn't think we're up to scratch. We're always comparing ourselves to our music speaking. We're always rating ourselves against our neighbours, South Sligo, Roscommon, Galway, the counties that the border. But yet, I suppose because of the mindset that you think, actually, who want to listen to me? I'm from Newport, or I'm from Belmullet, or I'm from West.
And I suppose the music was, like, even though it was in every household, it was very periphery. Like, it was in the evening after the work was done. Like, it was never a full. You know, it was. I mean, it had a space. It had a place in the life, but it wasn't the main thing.
No.
So it was very much put to back. Like my grandmother, for instance, that she played the accordion, and all her sisters, and I didn't know the rest of them played. My grandfather apparently bought her accordion after she moved, but when they left the house way down in Glenlaura, they all left their instruments in the home. They didn't bring their instruments with them when they married. So I never knew. Remember, one of them, because my grandmother died quite young. She was only 48 when she died. But then all our sisters were kind of like all these grannies. We had all these amazing grannies. There weren't grannies at all, but the aunts. And remember, one of them was very close in particular. She married a salmon man, and they were great musicians. The salmons too. And she she, after she died, I saw a picture of her playing the fiddle in the old kind of a parlour they had in the house, and I said, did Margaret play the fiddle? I said, no, all the time, and we'd have gone on our holidays there regular in that house.
So basically,
and they never brought the instruments with them, like that. They left them all when they got married. And she would, Walter, her son, Walter was a great box player. He bought her a fiddle years later, and she hadn't played it for her, and she used to play the odd tune then, but she didn't want anyone to hear or know about it.
So it wasn't as big a deal to them then, is it? Or was it seen as?
I think it was seen as, like, maybe the fact that they left the bogs and the mountains and wherever, and
came into the more townlandish.
maybe they wanted, then he had to behave. There wasn't
to behave it.
But
all
like
the neighbours think.
Like Wayne would talk about Donegal, and I know there's a very bad priest in Newport here around those years. And like, what was the fellow in Donegal said, that if you have a fiddle in your house, the devil's in your house. There was to be no music in the houses, and of course that whole, what was it, the Dance Act, the Dance Hall Act, that came in, and that would have stopped all that crack at the dance, and that it was that gave it such a bad reputation, like, because they're all that stopped, like. And that would into the hall, and then as a result of that, a lot of the women stopped because they weren't going in anyways. They weren't going into town. So like,
but because we had a period as well where, let's face it, it wasn't all. It was in country areas there was an interest in traditional music,
yeah.
But then of course there was the dance hall phase, and then the country phase in the 60s and 70s and stuff. So these people that were playing back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. There's probably no interest in their music come the 60s and 70s because of this new music that was the new fad that everyone was into. Like you'd have heard of the American musics for the first time. Radio Caroline, Radio Lux, all these pirate stations that were playing this kind of really strange music because RT wouldn't play that because it was devil music. So I'm sure your grandaunts, your own grandparents would have been listening to this newfangled music, and maybe I wonder, was it the fact that they pushed the melodeon and fiddle to one side a small bit because, well, we're talking about music now because we can see a career in it, or we can see it as being something a bit more. I wonder, back in the 40s, did it mean anything to them when they said they were Irish or from Mayo? Did that, again, pride of place, sense of community, did it really mean all that much to them as it does now? I'm from Mayo.
Well, I think, no, when they went away it did.
When they went
away. I do think when the way that
so if they stayed here, so like your aunts, they stayed here.
Yeah. But the idea was, I think when you got married, there was no way you could bring an instrument, no way, because you wouldn't have time to play music.
Right.
You couldn't bring it into another house. Of course, you'd be going into another house too, of course, but that you couldn't be going in. You wouldn't be getting a new house. You couldn't bring it in. I think they would have loved it because she loved music, and she loved to know. She'd be always asking me about music, and I never rejected, like, she always was into the music.
But it must have been really hard for her to be in a married.
And she married into a house where the old grandfather used to sit out on the hill and play the accordion. They'll talk about him up there, up on Ross, up in Camina, and he used to play the accordion. Oh, there's a tune of his now actually, so we must dig out for you. But old Walter Salmon, he used to play the accordion. Like, so there would have been music in the house, but I suppose she was supposed to be working all the time. She wasn't supposed to be sitting down playing the fiddle.
That's it, okay. So it wasn't. I hate to say it, but it was nearly. If you're the woman of the house, you had other chores to be doing besides enjoying yourself by playing the melodeon. And
the church had such a hold on them too. That Dance Act came in. What was it? That Dance Act came in where they got rid of
separation.
Yeah, but they didn't even want. They wanted, because the whole reason they came in was to stop the crossroad dancing and the house dance.
Right, yeah.
And there was drinking, whatever, and they couldn't tell it.
So they brought them into the town halls and stuff. Yeah.
And that I'd say caused more damage than anything. And they were so pious, like when you think, like I have relations down in Shramore, like, and they used to walk in. My grandmother's mother, like, she used to walk in from Shramore. That's an 8-mile walk and back. There would be no chipper on the way home. They used to walk in for early mass. They didn't have to fast beforehand and walk home again. Like, the church had an awful hold on them, and they wouldn't eat from the night before. Remember that? Because I remember we had that for a while at the start.
They couldn't eat from, was it 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening?
Yeah.
And they couldn't eat until
after
mass.
The people go on about Muslims now, and how strict they are on their diets and stuff. Sure, Jesus Christ,
it was as bad here.
It was as bad here, and like, if that was the control they had in them, and if they said there's no music, well, there's no music.
But there is stories of the priest coming in, breaking the chanterelles and breaking the bowls, the fiddle.
Yeah.
So.
And that would have come from the top.
That would have come from the top.
Yeah.
And this was in relative history, so this was right up nearly to the 50s and 60s. Which is relative history. It's not that.
We had a really good. There's a neighbour down here, Mr. Dick Mears, and he was a great land. He had land now. He would have been Protestant stock, but he was the best land neighbour. And he he had a bit of machinery like for the horse, and everyone in the area used it. Like he was a lovely man, they loved him. And when he died, I remember my grandfather went to the funeral, and because he'd lived beside him all his life, and same age and whatever, and he went to the funeral, and he thought he had to go out of respect, and he walked up, and he reckoned he didn't look at the Holy Host. He reckoned if he didn't do that, it was grand. He went up, sympathised with the family, and walked out again. And he was read from the altar in Newport. He was told he wasn't to be coming to church again. And Grandad, till the day he died, thought he was going to head straight to hell because he did that. They had that control on him. And from then on, my grandfather had no time for the church, but he still thought he was going to hell. He was convinced, up to the very end, like. He was convinced. Like, they had an awful hold of him.
And I hate to say, was it easier to pick on the country people?
I probably was, because they were very compliant. Yeah. And they had no money.
They had no money.
Let's
face it, education wouldn't have been...
No.
It was work.
Yeah, but they had no money for education.
They had no money for nothing. No.
The old lady in this house here, we found an old slip where she used to buy her... She had eggs, she had hens, and she used to buy all her groceries with eggs, barter. The travelling man used to come along. The little old slip. It was brilliant. But they had no money, like, it was born barter, wasn't it?
But we're talking about this now, saying how wonderful it was. It wasn't wonderful.
It wasn't.
It was very hard.
It was very hard.
It was poverty, like it was.
Yeah, but the fact that she had no money, but she could buy her t-shirt or salt and flour, I think, was all the list. That was all she was buying.
Because everything else was in the field or in the lake.
And that was hard work to get the rest of it. The easiest bit was taking an egg out of the old car. Yeah. They didn't have old cars in either.
But then everything is relative, because we're saying how much to be hard, but for them it wasn't nothing thought of it, because maybe their grandparents had it hard for them.
Definitely, yeah. The drier houses anyways, probably. The houses are probably getting better.
Right, they were getting better, yeah. The thatch was disappearing, maybe more slates or time.
Then actually, we got to talk about priests. We were getting married. The priest asked me in Newport, would I promise I wouldn't have Irish music at the wedding? I'm joking you. I only got married in 2005. Things haven't changed too much.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I didn't say I promise. I couldn't say I promise. But I said nothing for ages. And then he asked me again, and I said, and I was trying to think, 'cause my father's friend was marrying us, and I said, he won't be probably here at the wedding. So I said, okay, I wouldn't promise. But anyways, I'm sure I had people. I had Martin Hughes dance up the aisle as the offer. Because I said, well, this is our gift, like, music. So that was part of the offer thing. He danced the harp up the church, and the priest turned up.
My God.
He turned up. I thought, it would be excommunication now completely. But whatever, we survived.
But the whole idea of lately, it's a newfangled thing of having little concerts in churches.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been a thing.
Been, no.
So and you were married in 2005, so that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like you can't remember. You can remember the church music in the churches. Can you remember? I'd say your wedding having traditional music in the church was quite a strange thing.
And it was strange here, but we'd always play, if there was somebody who was like, we'd always play at the grave, and we'd always play outside the church on Paddy's Day. Outside the church, we actually danced a set in Newport outside the church. But in the recent years now, the new priest has his inside on the altar dancing and playing. But we'd always have played at grave. But of course, I was brought up, but we go to Milton Malbay and it's always there, like. So we think, well, why not have it here? And we'd have always done a bit of weddings. Of course, we'd have always played at weddings.
So it's basically down to the individual.
Down to the individual. Like, I know we played a lot in Ballintubber over the years at weddings, and that'd be your man, Father Fahey, like, he'd be all into that. And why wouldn't you have trad music? Yeah.
But it's as important, it's as relevant as the building he's in. I mean, it's as old as the building he's in. And
I used to go, and I remember thinking, the cheek of him, because when they built the church in Newport, everyone in Newport had to give so much money to that church. They were all fleeced to build that church in Newport. Now, your man played a lot of it, the old fella, Cleary, who had Newport at the time with a huge port, like. It was a very important port, but they had that Carey fella. He was involved in setting that up, but everyone had to give there as many days, and they had to give so much money to it.
So, what year are you talking about now?
18.
We go back to this Carey fella. So you mentioned this Carey fella. He was, what was he? A landlord, or was he a?
He was a merchant.
Merchant, okay.
He was a merchant. He would have brought. He apparently half the big building on the left hand side now, and a lot of the old buildings on the way down to. All those are Carey buildings, Carey Welsh buildings, and he'd have had those. And Newport was a big port, and the linen trade was massive, and he got the design that was built. But they all spent so much time. And my great grandfather went in. He had to give so many days and money to pay, like, to the church, like, and there was no way they couldn't pay it, like, they had to all pay this money into the church. And I remember when he went in, apparently he was a big tall man, Long Jamesy, and the priest told him at the time, we don't need you for hanging the bell, Jamesy. And I was thinking, and this pup that's in here now, filling in the shoes, tells me I can't have trad. You know.
And yet it's your people.
And it's our people that
built it.
That built it and paid for it. Like, you know.
Newport of the town, growing up, was it kind of somewhat interested in, was it a cultural town? Was it it was a country town? Was it, do you remember any characters?
Oh, there'd be great old characters around, yeah. Music characters now are normal characters.
We'll talk with normal characters first, yeah.
They'd be great singers, they'd be great into singing, like, lots of singers in Newport. And then the pub, Nelly, as we know him, Frankie Chambers, he'd have had a great pub there for music, and it was great music, that pub. Paddy Mills and Joe Byrne for years.
Pub for us,
yeah, great. And John Owen played, different people played there for years, and great welcome for it.
Right.
They'd been Chambers too, his mother was Chambers. They're always all great into music. And then you have to go and visit that Dominic O'Grady. Like below Newport, then there's that old Dorada school, and there's been Cayley's there since the 70s. Like they got them back going again.
Yeah.
That's a great old house. And Joe Kane would have played there, and John Francis Chambers cut his teeth there. The rest of us did as well. But you know, there was great old music there and dancing and.
So you mentioned that Kane man earlier on to
yes,
me.
Joe Kane. Shraloggy.
From where?
Shraloggy.
Wow.
The Shraloggy.
Shraloggy.
The real wet Shra, like they're bad enough Shra.
Yeah, Shraloggy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you he played?
He played the accordion and fiddle.
Alright, yeah.
And he played the piano as well, but accordion and fiddle, yes.
And how relevant would he be to the area? Like, would he be the kind of a knowledgeable man of the kind of the music culture in the area?
Yes, totally. And he played. Now he'd be more an example of that playing at home. He played his house.
The house dancers.
And a dancer's house, but there'd be always a session every weekend, every Saturday night in his house. And it used to be in Fuzzmore sometimes, and there'd be an house every night, every Saturday night or Friday night to be a tune there. And I remember that when I met him, John Hogan brought me down to him, and he said, I thought, and I never forget, he was right. He said, "And are you still going to pubs? Like, are you still absolutely out of your head? Like, what are you doing going to pubs? Like, he wouldn't have gone here. He'd hardly have ever gone to a pub playing music. He'd have played in Drada, and he played every Saturday night or Friday night and a few other nights, and he would have played at things like that and dances. But he thought going to pub.
The pub thing is relatively new.
It is. But he also thought that there was no one listening to you.
Right.
Why would you go to pub and no one listen to you?
Okay.
And for him, he was very social man. He'd be telling stories about the tunes, and he'd have everyone involved. Everyone would be involved in it. Like, and very inclusive. Yeah, he would learn some music from that fiddle player, James Doherty. There was.
Yeah, the travelling. So there's a James Doherty travelling. Right. We're very close to the homeland of one of these kind of musical icon, I suppose you could call him, a McFadden, who emigrated. Very important in the kind of Irish music world, in the sense that of his legacy, what he's left after him, his contacts, the people he met. As again, we mentioned the greats from South Sligo. Mayo had their greats as well, and like he was definitely one of them. He lived not so far from here.
No, he was from Carmore.
Yeah.
Just along. This is the line here. This valley. You
Right.
go along here, and it'll be just the next one over.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see it.
So he was from there. He emigrated as a young man shortly after the famine. We take it.
Yes,
So
we take it. Yes.
Yeah.
With himself and his brother, who played the fiddle, and his father who also played the fiddle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's no track of his siblings or his mother, whatever happened there.
And there's no information about them.
No.
We don't know anything about them. Jeez.
No, we don't know what happened then. His mother's name right. He was born there, and I imagine being born in 1847, black 47, like.
In the middle of it.
And all that area was all like there's a lot of houses. You look back at the older censuses, there was a lot of houses there at the time, but then they all they gave up their land for the passage. More than, and then the other side of it, our side of it here, a lot of them were evicted. Huge amount of evictions. That area, the landlord around this area wasn't very liked. He was a very tough man. Now it wasn't liked at all. But he got rid of a lot of people, and there was flax was big, of course, and linen, and it was different. People were in the way, like.
The fact that you had to give away the land.
Yes, so there was no back.
No,
gone.
But then surely the men just didn't leave their mother and their sisters after them.
No, I'd say they must have died or something.
Or died, yeah. Because that would have been around the time of the famine, surely.
Yeah.
Because there is a big legacy of women emigrating. Ireland, I think, is even ahead of Poland when it comes to female immigrants. believe it or not, even on a European scale. The amount of Irish women that has left Ireland to go to.
But you know, they'd have to leave because they were in the way, a lot of them. Because the men got their land, they were in the way.
Oh, and that's the other side of it. So the first son got the field. Yeah.
Or the youngest sometimes, but mostly the first. If the first didn't want to go or whatever.
Yeah.
But they had to get out of the way.
So they had to leave. Or marry into some family.
Yeah. Move along. And it was that notion of, you know, divide, like that.
Dividing what?
There was down to
they're tiny anyway.
They're tiny anyway, like.
Yeah. So
dividing your sons.
So, but I was talking to someone there lately that people are even looking forward to go because they heard these great stories about over there and the opportunities, the land of opportunity, and all this that we hear about it. That they must have been just dying to go and well willing to give up their land to go. I mean.
Oh yeah, and if you imagine if you're born in the middle of that, 1847, and whatever happened to the rest of them, like if we could presume that they died.
Well, if there's no written documentation.
There's no written documentation at the wife, and they don't just they want to get out there. They're going to wait to starve as well. Like there was nothing. Which is an awful time.
She's going to complain about relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking, yeah.
You're here. You have a family. You're a teacher.
Yes.
Musically, how active are you? Are you active enough for?
I have to say now, the whole COVID thing has shut us down. I used to play an awful lot, like, you know, play a lot of music and a lot of it for the crack, you know, a lot of it going, like, I'd always go to East Mayo up to the lads, you know, I'd be very much happy. Graham, my husband, is of course a violin maker and harp maker. He works late sometimes, so it'd be a great license for me to go play tunes somewhere. So it'd be great for travelling or, you know, calling to somebody or, you know, go for tunes. But it has quietened, and I played a bit of music. I'm very conscious of the fact that that the tradition is carried on. That's one thing I think. That's one thing maybe I inherited from my mother or whatever. That my mother always felt bad that she missed it. She blames the Beatles that she gave up the party. She blames the Beatles, but that it was carried on to the next generation. And in Newport now we have a great old system going where we have sessions and, you know, we bring them away. We go on a trip away. We went to Lewisburg last year. All the way, no, we went to Murris last year.
Well, I say you bring them, so there'll be a gang of kids.
Go to for a night and, you know, and get that interest going and get, you know, they have that and they love playing, and there's a great dance teacher in Newport too, and Martin Hughes as well, and Caroline O'Malley and a few of those, and there's a great old community and we work together well and we do Ceoils with the kids and we have playing and tunes and I think that's very important. They really do like it. Like it's been very quiet now.
With COVID, of course,
and I'm afraid that we lose the battle. It'll be all.
I think.
Worried.
Are you doing anything online like the
No, I think everyone is just OD'd on the online.
Okay, it's a bit too much.
Well, it's hard. There's a lot of numbers on there too. It'd be very hard. You can spend your whole night doing it. Or it'd be group ones, which wouldn't really work. I don't think. For that, you know, for younger ones.
But I think. Especially, which would be different to our time playing, like there seems to be more, it's a bit cooler now to play.
Yes, there's a certain amount of that.
So there's a bit of that in it, and that's, even when I came here, say your own young one was online, learning on an online class for music generation, on her own bat, she didn't have to be, that's the great thing I see about young ones now, God I sound like an old man, but they don't have to be brought by the hand and say, play. No. Or else, you know, and that they're doing it on their own bat and their own interest in it, so
and some great teachers around, like, you know, we've had well, more than yourself, it's great that you're around, but Emer was great, when I had the kids, I got Emer to take over my class, and she still has all those kids, you know, kept them going, and then Gráinne Hambly is fantastic. Leisha teaches Arnie as well, and they're really nurturing, like. There's a great there, and then David Ducey was teaching, they loved him, like Owen loved going to him, and John McHugh was teaching Owen for a while, and John was great too for setting up his, you know, and John Kilkenny of course has done
amazing amount of work.
Amazing work.
Phenomenal.
And no, the brother, like they have, like I know people say, you know, they're getting they're getting paid to a point, but they're not. It's their whole life. You wouldn't be doing it unless you like it.
And you're passing on a lot more. But you're passing on a lot more than the tune.
Yeah.
I think there's an awful lot been more taught than just the notes.
Like John, I was sending John to Owen for a while, and Owen was losing interest, like, you know. But he'd lose it before he got to John at all. And John reckoned this, so he reckoned there was another way into it. So I was saying that he was using the fiddle to do science experiments, like, you know, to get another interest, you know, and chat the way and tell his story. And to get him, you know, he knew that he needed more than just the tunes, like. And they had a great old chats. He meets John, he chats to him, like, you know. But there's a real interest, like, maybe it's that passing on interest that we have.
But isn't that nearly more important sometimes than the tune, the person?
Yeah.
The
yes,
character.
Definitely.
The crack, the bit of...
Yeah.
The bit of going on even before the tune is played at all. Getting to know someone.
Definitely.
Nearly that's what you remember more than what they played.
Yeah.
Is that how they talked to you and the stories they told you, the bit of crack they had with you and so on. Yeah.
And John Hoban for me would have been a great source of for that at the start, you know. And then we had him when we were teenagers, and it was just nothing that cool. And it was great. John would have all sorts of things, you know. And then he'd always keep connecting with you. You know, he keeps coming back, and you know, he'll have different things, or you know, it's a lifetime. It is a long, you know, it's a full life. It's a lifetime commitment.
It's a full-time job. Yeah.
When someone asks me to take on kids, I'm thinking, oh Jesus, you know, it's nearly like the next 20 years. It's a good spell.
And also you take it really personal because you want them to succeed as much as
you do, and you want them to like it.
You want them to like it.
You don't want to be the teacher that put them off. Like.
Oh no. You want them to come back and have a knee, and it is hard, especially when you take it personally yourself or when you take it passionately yourself.
Yeah.
To finish up, you're from Mayo. How important is it for you to be from this county?
I am delighted it's this county I'm from and not other county, I have to say. And maybe it's a total Mayo thing. We mightn't have won All Ireland. But I don't know, I have to say, there's something about, and maybe it's that we are probably the underdog in certain situations, but there also is a great, well, we're talking about resilience. There's a resilience, but there's also, like, look at the place. It's a lovely county. And I don't know, the people are great, and there's a great richness, and there's a great community. There's a great community and a great richness. And like, I'm only discovering half the Mayo music that we didn't realise was Mayo music.
It's the same as
like, you know, there's a whole, maybe we're coming around the corner here that we appreciate more. I don't know, maybe that's, I know this is just the time we're in or whatever, that we're appreciating.
But I was going, like, could you put that down to something? Why does it seem to be lately we've had a bit more kind of respect for what's under our noses?
Yeah. Well, I think there was a certain amount of, like I mentioned 1916 when the 100th thing was on there a few years ago. The amount of people who talked about things that were never spoken about. I even found out that an uncle, my grandfather, the fiddle, that his brother died in the Wicklow Mountains. He was involved in that 1916, and we never heard that up until then. And it was like, it was okay to have all those talks, you know, like you know, I suppose because it was a civil war after all that. People never talked about it. It was never talked about because, you know, there was neighbour against neighbour, and we know neighbours and whatever on different sides, you know. And that was all. And then maybe it just was long enough away that the grandfathers, you know, some of them are gone or whatever, but there was an openness for people telling stories about things that you never heard at that time. And maybe that has made us realise that there's history there, that there is something there, like that because that was never spoken about, like the black and tan stories and all those, they were never talked about, or the old IRA. And then the IRA the whole IRA name went sullied. You know, there was a different connotation. And then it was a different thing, but maybe it made people, I think in a way that brought back a lot of that. And people even telling stories about, you know, remember the Ackland lads around, but they came up, there was a commemoration for 50 years of the 1916 50th commemoration in Newport, and there were about people that played at it and stuff, and John Twyn was at that. He brought up some tambourine yoke of a thing or something that they used to use when the black and tans were coming into the village, and they brought up here for this, and there was part of the procession and all this, and them all playing whistles and fifes and different things.
And Newport had a kind of a thing going on where there was a Newport Brigade.
There was, oh yeah.
Which was very strong politically as well. Like, and there was
Newport had held their own republic. I think it's hilarious, for 3 days or something. because Newport, of course, the crossing of the river was a major strategic point, and over here. They held them off here. Imagine that they held them off.
Oh my God!
And then they escaped up to the Tremor thing. My grandfather's people, Michael Kilroy was very much. He was the head of that brigade.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, their own republic. But I know to be very strong. Like people often say, "Oh, Newport," but there's a very strong. They're very strong, proud of their culture and that.
How relevant was? I talked to everyone about that. Like immigration to this part of the country. Like, I mean. You talked about before, as a county, we're known to have I think the most townlands and the most kind of parishes mentioned in any other counties.
The most local and the most place names.
The most place names.
Yeah.
And you said yourself there's a mountain just behind the house here where one time it was covered in houses.
Covered, yeah. And
then that emptied.
And a lot of them would have been settled down here because this was the landlords and he kept it clean. It was all his. But then at the Land League, the Land League, they're all settled, you know, and there was that, what was it called again, the rural there was a load of houses built on that. You know that rural
development or rural.
Yeah. And the people got glass houses and that and all that. And then that was the same scheme that brought people up to Meath.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of
there
was such a mass of people moving like we're gone very settled, aren't we? In some ways.
are, but there must have been a massive population in the county.
Huge population.
For so many to be able to
move.
And I'm not just talking about the famine, but like the people that went up to Rathcarden or all these places in Meath or rural.
It's not electrification now. Before the electrification.
No, rural out.
Because there's actually a skept. There's a kind of a beehive. There's a type of beehive, and it's called after that. Cause, oh my God! Because my grandma, we had bees, and there was the old beehive they had. I will think of the name of it. I'll ask Graham.
They went out. They were pushed out of this county. Why do you think they were asked to resettle somewhere else? Why do you think that was then?
Well, I think a part of them was happy to settle for anywhere else because where they had was nothing. Like the little stripes of land they had up at the side of the mountain. It's only good for wildlife.
So basically poor land.
Poor land.
And small amounts.
And I suppose they thought they were getting something better. Right. There's people that came back from Rathcarden though, they was too busy.
Just too busy?
Yeah.
And the land was too good.
The land was too good. There was no
softness in it. There was no sponge. Yeah.
But there was too much work to be done. And the people were too busy, they had no time to talk to you.
It must have been really hard for them though, because they were used to, their neighbours was only a stone's throw literally from their door, and now they're going up to a place where their neighbour might be a 2-minute walk or I'm just trying to imagine.
A few miles away.
Even a few miles away.
Yeah.
Like.
But they did move, but I suppose maybe at the time it wasn't just Mayo, but.
Oh no, there's an awful lot of counties, and especially the poor counties.
All along the western
seaboard. Yeah. The poor lands, Galway, Donegal, Sligo in particular.
Yeah.
They're all asked to kind of leave and go up to a.
I suppose they were offered it, and when you went, you got a horse. Like you got a house and a horse.
So you got
something like that you didn't have, and especially like they were all big families, so you couldn't stay at home. Like you had to go, like you really had to go, like. But even when I went to primary school or so over the road here in Cremore, I remember the older ones in 6th and 5th class saying, "Where are you going? And where are you going? And where are you going?" Because everyone was still immigrating. That was the middle of the 80s. Everyone was immigrating. And that was Monsignor Horan's days, and there was more people leaving than coming back into Knock, wasn't there? Everyone was like, "Are you going to America? Are you going to?" And we'd have all hear the stories about such and such one that we'd known, like they had gone to such a where are you going, and that was all of the question.
But then some of them were coming back for a while.
They came back, but not in the 80s.
No, the noughties.
The noughties came back.
The early noughties, they were coming back, and then things changed again, and some of them same people are leaving again, or some other, so. It seems to be a big thing in Mayo, leaving.
Yeah, well, it is.
We're famous for leaving.
We're famous for leaving, yeah. Because it was the land was so bad. It must be one of the worst land in the country as well.
Oh, it was. I think
Connemara now would be
the two poorest counties is Donegal and Mayo on record. So, and a lot of that is because of land. A lot of that is.
And then bad landlords too. They were
what was thought of the place.
Yeah.
I think as well.
Yeah.
You're out there in the periphery.
Yeah.
Out there in the sticks and that whole God help us thing is there, and that kind of.
And then of course there was a time there, like in Newport, like at one point in Newport, the height of the linen trade, Newport port was huge. Like apparently it was a bigger port than Westport. It's hard to believe now, and because it was a deeper. It could take people. It could take bigger ships, whatever. But there were 7 different churches in Newport. Imagine 7 different churches in Newport. Like every church. Like there was Plymouth Brethren. They were beside us, and then there was Quakers and everything else, and they had. So they needed that population. They needed a population. So people were coming to the area too for employment. There was people coming from the north. There was a lot of people from the north down here during the persecutions in the north, down about 1750s. In those years, they came down here, and they were all, and they would have had some kind of background in it, I suppose, up the north with the linen trade up there. And they came down here, and there was even plaiting schools in Newport. So it was like basically, well, it was almost slave labour, but it wasn't because it was the only labour they had. And they had little kids because they could only do little children, and they used to make all these, those big white, these big bonnets. You see in the old, those pictures, the massive big bonnets, and they were made with hundreds of these tiny little plats, and there used to be plaiting schools in Newport. And I don't know it was the Quakers that set that up, but they set it up so that the kids could be earning something.
But what drew so many people to the town? Was it because of the port? Like you mentioned, 7 churches, so 7 different.
There was a big
denominations.
I don't know.
That means there's a population.
There was a population, yeah. There was a huge population. But a lot of those came down. They were said the persecutions in the north and the Catholics.
Okay, so they had to get out.
A lot of
It's a lot that went to Lewisburg and stuff, and Westport, well, so.
Yeah. And that whole area there was like wasteland, sure, it was only bog. I know that a lot of that was settled with them. Like the Chambers is apparently supposed to come down, and sure, full of Chambers now. And the Kilroys is supposed, the original Kilroy man is supposed to come off a boat and land in Newport, got off the boat, whether he was on a boat to find Demons Land or not, there's all sorts of speculation. And then more of them, a lot of their name, like they'll say that it was originally an Antrim name or an Armagh name, some of the names, like, that's where they originally came from.
I wonder what besides just getting off a boat, but something that must have drawn them down to.
I suppose it must be on, and when you think about it, as Leisha was on about that recently, we were on about the boat trip that she's organising. Like, you left here and you went up around the coast, like you weren't going across land. So I suppose if there's a port, if you're coming down, Sligo, Donegal.
Yeah. Pick a port.
Yeah.
So being from this county as a person from the county, like as a musician, it means a lot to you. Yes. It just means a lot to you to be from here.
Yeah, and I suppose it is probably it's because you're from here. I suppose that's the bottom line, isn't it? I suppose I'm from here and I'm delighted to be from here, and maybe that whole community of belonging. You know, like I wouldn't, you know, as much as I love living in Galway and all the rest, I was, you know, you're blowing. You know, I suppose it's great, and I suppose it's great encouragement. You know, the Joe Byrnes, and it's a great encouragement around, like, you know, people were delighted to see you coming home, and you know, John Francis Chambers and Dominic, a great journey them, you know, and you feel like, great.
The young one was coming back, and she was staying, and she was going to play music,
and delight, and you know, and I suppose Med felt at home again, like, you know, it was good to be home, like. Yeah. When you
were away, did you ever feel anything but from Mayo? Like, was there ever?
Oh no, I've been very much, and when I went to Dublin first, like, I remember people did say, you say from Newport, they wouldn't have heard Newport, they would have heard of Westport, but they wouldn't have heard, no, you know, it was a different thing. But when I went away, it was like, I suppose maybe you had to go away too to appreciate it, like.
That's another thing.
Yeah. And then you'd miss the sea as well when you go away.
Yeah.
There's a big draw to the sea, like. Yeah.
And you're not far from it.
No, just a mile at the crow there, out the window. But yeah, the connection.
It is. It's extremely important.
Yeah. Brilliant. And you feel you belong, you know, even carrying on that tradition that you will, because you got it here. This is where we got the music, like.
But even to see the young ones, they're on kind of how it's gone around, how you're talking about where you learnt it and who encouraged you, your mother. Yeah. When I came here today, I saw your young one in there at a laptop, learning her music. From a Scottish man. Online. But like,
Billy Jackson.
She was learning it. Like you learnt it. She learnt it. She that tradition has been continued in modern times. It's a WW.
Well, they were actually together last week, you know. So she was so upset this week they weren't together again because they got back together for the first time.
Yeah.
And then they had to go back to us again.
Jeez, all right, okay.
It's a great old bunch. Gráinne's great with them too, and Billy's great. They're brilliant with them. Yeah.
Where do they meet then?
They meet in the education centre.
Oh, right.
The hospital.
Yeah, very good.
Great room, not that old room.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Great acoustics and everything.
Plenty of room, plenty of space for them.
Yeah. And there's things like that too, like not every county got that. I can't believe they didn't get that.
Music generation. No, only a few.
That was very much Art Sullivan was big behind that, pushing that. Yeah, he was going to get it, like.
Is there anything else you'd like to, just to finish up? Is there anything you'd like to add to leave for hundreds of years of prosperity here?
Well, I hope there's still music here in 100 years' time.
Well,
we've done our job.
We'll have done our job. Yeah.
We'll have done our job then. I don't know. I suppose I always regard, when you say I'm a teacher, I was laughing because I actually still think I'm just doing the teaching as a aside, like. Right. I'm not, like, I still really, in my veins I'm a musician, like I have to play every day.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, like, you know, it's a big thing.
And would you be, but as a teacher of the books, we say, like, to separate it, would they know you as a musician?
Well, I do, because I play in school, and they all play. Everyone in school in our place plays. They all play, fantastic. Which is brilliant. Remember when I worked there? That was one of the reasons I wanted to go there first. I was filling in there, subbing, and it was like 20 minutes to go home, and I was like, oh Jesus, what do we do? And they're all like, can we play music? We haven't played music yet. And I thought, do you play music yet? Everyone took out an instrument. Boxes, accordions, whistles. Now the fiddle's been introduced since I was there, but fantastic.
What do you want?
Your
job is done here.
Yeah, well, exactly, that's what you want. And I suppose to me, I love that it's part of the day and you see kids coming in with instruments on their back.
And they want to.
And they want to, like.
They're not embarrassed anymore.
No, and it's to get to that level. Yeah. Oh, I suppose then it's not, maybe it's not for everybody, but I would always think that you'd have an appreciation for it. You know, that even if you didn't like it or whatever, but that you could listen to it. Like Joe Byrne, if you ever met anyone that Joe Byrne taught, they love music.
Yeah.
They love music.
Because he
and they love the culture and the names and the Irish, the bits they use.
Because he dragged that into
he
put it into them.
yeah. Pure growl like.